What is up, engine heads? Today we're hitting on all sixes as we explore the engine balance and the strengths and weaknesses of the four most popular six-cylinder engine configurations: the inline 6, the V6, the VR6, and the flat 6. But before we can talk about engine balance, just a super quick little recap on primary and secondary engine balance. If you already know about that, then you can click this timestamp right here to skip primary and secondary engine balance. Or if this is your first time watching this engine balance series, you can continue watching, or you can watch the first video, which is this one in the series, for a more detailed step-by-step, easy to understand explanation of primary and especially secondary engine balance. A primary engine imbalance is the result of an unbalanced mass in the reciprocating assembly of your engine. In other words, your pistons are usually the greatest potential source of a primary engine imbalance. An engine with an odd number of pistons is going to have a primary imbalance if the mass of the odd piston isn't balanced out by the other pistons. Secondary engine imbalances occur because the piston travels at different speeds at the top and bottom half of the stroke. It does this because it has to cover a greater distance at the top half than at the bottom half of the stroke. This occurs because although the piston moves in a simple up and down motion, the connecting rod does not. The con rod steps out from a linear path of motion, and because it does this, it pulls down the piston a greater distance during the top half of the stroke. A greater distance means that the piston must travel faster to cover this greater distance. And because of this, there's a difference in speed between the top and bottom half of the stroke. And because there's a difference in speed, there's also a difference in inertial forces between the top and bottom half of the stroke. And this difference in inertial forces is the source of secondary engine imbalances. So that's it for primary and secondary balance. Now let's start with the inline 6-cylinder engine. We already covered it twice, so many of you know that it's a beautifully simple and beautifully balanced engine configuration. It's beautifully simple because it needs only one cylinder head, only one or two cams, and only one exhaust manifold. The only real downside of an inline 6 is its length, and because of its length, it's very hard to fit it transversely in an engine bay. But other than the length, it's very hard to fault the inline 6-cylinder engine. It's beautifully balanced because, first of all, it has an even firing interval. If we divide 720, which is the number of degrees, it takes a 4-stroke engine to complete one combustion cycle, by 6, which is the number of cylinders, we get 120 degrees. It tells us that the inline 6-cylinder engine fires every 120 degrees of crank rotation. If we deduct 120 from 180, we get minus 60. The minus tells us that we have 60 degrees of power stroke overlap, so that's pretty significant power stroke overlap, resulting in a very smooth engine. When it comes to balance, the inline 6 is essentially two inline 3s mirroring each other. As we know, the inline 3-cylinder engine has a primary imbalance in relation to its center of gravity due to its odd number of pistons. This is especially apparent every time the first or the last cylinder in the inline 3 fires. When cylinder 1 fires, for example, the downward force of piston 1 creates a reaction at the opposite end of the engine, and when piston 1 goes down, it tries to yank the other end of the engine up. Now, piston 3 cannot cancel this force out because when piston 1 is atop that center, piston 3 is not at the bottom dead center. Piston 3 isn't doing the opposite thing of piston 1, so it cannot cancel the force out, which means that when it's running, the inline 3-cylinder engine has a rocking moment back to front. But the inline 6-cylinder engine does not have a primary imbalance. There's two inline 3s in front of a mirror, so they cancel each other's rocking moment out, and the inline 6 has a perfect primary balance. The inline 3-cylinder has no issues with secondary balance because at any one time the 3 pistons are at different parts of their stroke, which means that there's no problems with secondary balance. The inline 6, of course, inherits this, and it also has no issues with secondary balance. The V6 was created to fix the one problem of the inline 6-cylinder engine, its length. A V6 is a lot shorter than an inline 6. A V6 is almost as short as an inline 3-cylinder engine, which means that fitting it transversely in an engine bay is a lot easier than fitting a inline 6 transversely in an engine bay. But the V6 has to pay a price for its compactness. The first thing that it loses is the inherent primary balance of the inline 6-cylinder engine. In a V6 engine, there's no mirroring of inline 3s. Instead, the two inline 3s are split into two banks of the V, which means that there's no cancelling out of the primary rocking moment of the inline 3, and instead each bank of the V of a V6 inherits the primary imbalance of an inline 3. And to fix it, the V6 engine needs engineering aids, and they usually come in the form of balancing shafts and or crankshaft counterweights, large and heavy crankshaft counterweights, and or offset weights in the crankshaft pulley or the flywheel. But the V6 engine also needs engineering aids to have an even firing interval. In our previous engine balance video, we learned that if you split cylinders in a V configuration, you need to decide on the angle between the two banks of the V. In any V engine, the perfect bank angle is the one that enables a naturally even firing interval. And that bank angle equals the firing interval of the engine. So in the case of a V engine with 6 cylinders, such as a V6, the perfect bank angle is 120 degrees, the same as the firing interval, but a 120 degrees V6 is impractical. It's very wide, which means it's no longer compact, which means that it neuters the compact nature and the whole purpose of a V6, because it becomes very hard to install a 120 degrees V6 into any sort of engine bay. So instead we make a 60 degree or a 90 degree V6 or any other number of degrees that enable a more narrow bank angle, which results in a more compact engine. But there's an issue here. Any V6 that doesn't have 120 degrees between the banks needs offset crank pins to have an even firing intervals. The crank pins in a V6 crankshaft are offset by what's called a splay angle. The splay angle makes up for whatever is missing in the bank angle, and although it does complicate the crankshaft, it enables an even firing interval with the wrong bank angle. So as you can see, if it wants to be smooth like an inline 6, the V6 needs several engineering aids, but it also needs double the number of cylinder heads, double the number of cams if it isn't a pushrod V6, and double the number of exhaust manifolds compared to an inline 6-cylinder engine. So as you can see, the V6 achieves compactness and smoothness by sacrificing simplicity. But what if you wanted the inherent balance and the simplicity of an inline 6 with the compactness of the V6, but without the double cylinder heads? How would you do that? Of course, you would breed the inline 6 together with the V6, and the offspring would be called VR6. In fact, the VR actually means in German V-Reihenmotor, or literally translated, it means V inline engine, and this is exactly what the VR engine is. It inherits the genes of both of its parents, and its goal is to be as inherently balanced as an inline 6 while not being as complicated as a V6. This was the guiding principle according to which Volkswagen designed the VR6 engine. They wanted something that had 6 cylinders that they could stuff into an engine bay of a compact car, but without the double cylinder heads, double cams, and double exhaust manifolds of a V6 engine. The VR6 engine is essentially a V6 engine, but it has an extremely narrow angle between the two banks of the V. In the case of Volkswagen engines, that's either 10.6 or 15 degrees between the two banks. And this very narrow angle brings the cylinders so close together that you can cover them all with a single, pretty wide, but still a single cylinder head. When it comes to primary and secondary balance, the VR6 is almost the same as an inline 6. The keyword here is almost. Now in the VR6 we have the same firing order as in a typical inline 6. We even have an extremely similar crankshaft. The anatomy is almost the same, with the crankshaft in the VR6 of course being shorter. And because we have almost the same crankshaft, it means that we have the same pistons moving in the same pairs in the VR6 and in the inline 6-cylinder engine. The difference is that narrow little degree of separation between the two banks of the VR6, which means that in the VR6 the cylinders aren't quite all in a single line, which means that in the VR6 we do not have true canceling out of two inline threes as we do in the inline six-cylinder engine. That being said, that little angle is very narrow, which means that the VR6 is still inherently a pretty smooth engine, and it is better balanced than any generic V6 engine. This means that unlike the V6, the VR6 needs minimal engineering aids. You need some slanted pistons so you could fit a single cylinder head on two banks of separated cylinders, and you need a bit of additional crankshaft counterweights to get rid of the imbalances created by the narrow angle of separation between the two cylinder banks. So this means that the VR6 is the holy grail of six-cylinder engine configurations. It's as simple as an inline six, but it's more compact than an inline six. Well, actually, no, it's not as simple as an inline six. It's not as simple because we're fitting a single cylinder head to a bunch of cylinders that are not in a straight line. This means that the combustion chambers in that cylinder head are also not going to be in a line. This means that we're going to have a difference in the length between different intake and exhaust ports. And this, of course, is not a good thing. It means that different cylinders are going to have different power and torque curves, different power bands, and this, of course, results in a horrible engine. So this inherent problem of the VR6 must be fixed with engineering aids, and they come in the form of the intake and exhaust manifolds, making up for the differences in length between the intake and exhaust ports. And we also sometimes have different camshaft profiles employed for different cylinders to equalize their performance. This, of course, adds a bit of mumbo jumbo and complexity to the VR6. All that being said, from an engineering perspective, the VR6 engine is a success. It achieves its goals. It's very compact. It's in fact more compact than most V6 engines. It's so compact that many compare it to the inline 4 in terms of compactness. And although it's not as simple as an inline 6-cylinder engine, it is certainly more simple than a V6 because it has a single cylinder head, the same number of cams as an inline 6, and the same number of intake and exhaust manifolds as an inline 6. And although it's not quite as inherently well balanced as an inline 6, it is still inherently better balanced than a V6 engine. And although it does have its quirks, as I said, from an engineering perspective, it's definitely a success. Our final engine configuration for today is the flat 6, or more precisely, the boxer 6 engine. Every engine that has horizontally opposed cylinder banks is a flat engine, but in order for it to be a boxer as well, it must have the pistons move in and out together, as you can see on this little animation. For example, the engine in the Ferrari Testarossa is a flat 12, but it's not a boxer because the connecting rods in that engine share a crank pin. Its pistons do not move in and out together, hence it's only a flat 12, but not a boxer 12. However, all the flat 6 engines we care about, like the ones made by Porsche or Subaru, are in fact boxer 6s. Now, a boxer 6, just like an inline 6, has a mirroring or cancelling out of two inline 3s. It's just that the boxer 6 does it differently. In the inline 6, we have two inline 3s in a line, but in the boxer 6, we have them horizontally opposed so they can cancel each other out. But there's a little catch with the boxer engine. In order for the pistons to move in and out together, they must each have their own crank pin, which means that the pistons in a boxer engine are not truly directly horizontally opposed. To have them truly directly horizontally opposing each other, we would need a very complicated connecting rod arrangement, which of course wouldn't be practical for manufacturing purposes. And this offset between the pistons of a boxer engine means that the two inline 3s in a boxer 6 are also offset from each other, which means that they're not canceling each other fully. But what's important is the size of the offset in relation to the size of the engine. For example, in the boxer twin engine, which is only 2 cylinders, the size of the offset is almost half the engine, which means that it creates significant imbalances. For example, BMW motorcycles have these engines in them, and you will see that more modern versions of the BMW boxer twin actually use balancing shafts to get rid of these imbalances. But in the boxer 6, the size of the offset is extremely small in relation to the total engine size, which means that the imbalances created by this little offset in the boxer 6 are pretty much irrelevant. So the Boxer 6 is pretty much perfectly balanced because it too does a lot of the canceling out of the inline 3s, but it has another ace up its sleeve. It has a very short and a very light crankshaft, and it can have a very light crankshaft because its crankshaft has very small, narrow and light counterweights, and it can afford to do this because of its horizontally opposed layout. As you might know, in an inline engine configuration, the crankshaft counterweight cannot be used to balance out the mass of the piston and the con rod. It cannot do this because while the crankshaft counterweight rotates, the piston reciprocates. This means that when they're in this position, the counterweight can indeed cancel out the mass of the piston, but as the engine rotates further, we can see that the counterweight now points in a totally different direction to the piston, which means that it cannot cancel out the mass of a piston, which means that crankshaft counterweights in inline engines actually only cancel out the mass of the crank pin and the part of the rod that is right onto the crank pin. So this is why inline 6-cylinder engines and other inline engines, for example, need relatively heavy counterweights to cancel out the mass of their crank pins. But the VR6 engine doesn't need this. Because it's a Boxer 6 engine, we have the crank pins opposed from each other horizontally at 180 degrees, which means that the crank pins in the VR6 can actually cancel each other out for the most part, which means that in theory you could actually make the crankshaft of a Boxer 6 engine without any counterweights. Actually, Porsche did that in the past, but as you can see, modern VR6 engines, actually all of them have crankshaft counterweights. Here's one from Porsche. Here's the EZ30 from Subaru, for example. They all have counterweights. Now, they have counterweights because counterweights in a crankshaft do a great deal in improving the longevity of the engine. They reduce the dynamic stresses and the fatigue of the engine, and they also reduce the loads on the main bearings. Now, how exactly all that works is a topic for another video, which I may cover in the future. So being able to have very small counterweights reduces crankshaft mass, which means that the VR6 can be a very, very rev-happy engine. Since we're speaking about crankshafts, we also must mention crankshaft length and torsional vibration. This is something where the inline 6 seems a bit of a loser because it does have the longest crankshaft, which means that it is susceptible to the most torsional vibration. Torsional vibration occurs when you apply torsion, actually when you apply a load to a shaft at a length, at a distance from some sort of resistive load. In our case, the shaft is of course our crankshaft, our load is of course the piston under combustion, and our resistive load is of course the clutch, for example. The longer the shaft, the greater the torsional vibration. This means that the inline 6 engine, which is the longest and has the longest crankshaft, is subject to the most torsional vibration. Now, you can't really feel torsional vibration outside the engine, but it can actually destroy an engine and a crankshaft. However, in our previous video where we covered the inline 6, we have learned that the right engineering, the right material at the right places can definitely pretty much eliminate torsional vibration issues from modern inline 6 engines, which are capable of sustaining extremely high loads, even in the most modified of their versions. That being said, eliminating torsional vibration concerns usually means adding material, adding strength, and thus adding mass, which means that when it comes to crankshaft design, the VR6 is a winner. So overall, the VR6 is a winner. Well, yes, it is very balanced. Yes, it does have a very light crankshaft, but there is of course a price to be paid, and the VR6 pays the price in being the most complex engine configuration of all the 4 engine configurations we talked about today. It's also horrible for packaging because it's very wide, and stuffing it into an engine bay is definitely not easy. When it comes to the complexity we mentioned, it does have 2 cylinder heads, 2 exhaust manifolds, complicated intake manifolds usually. It also has pretty complicated timing belt or timing chain arrangements. Even the engine block has to be made of 2 halves. So it's definitely the most expensive and complex engine to manufacture, which explains why, although it is very awesome, it is a very rare engine configuration. So that's it when it comes to the most popular 6-cylinder engine configurations. I hope you enjoyed that, found it useful, and maybe even a bit entertaining. In the future, we will of course explore more engine configurations in the engine balancing series. We will also talk about flat plane and cross plane stuff and much more. So if you're enjoying this, stay tuned for that as well. As always, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon with more fun and useful stuff on the D4A channel.